Fans, we are live on thehannibaltv.com with the Great North Wrestling Podcast. And tonight we're pleased to have a much anticipated continuation of a series that we've been doing on the children of very legendary professional wrestlers. And this is perhaps the top of the mountain, so to speak, in terms of personal interests and wrestlers that I followed the career of growing up, and I know there's tremendous fan interest in the career of Ravishing Rick Rude, and we are very pleased to welcome Mr. Rick Rood Jr. to the Great North Wrestling Podcast. How are you today, sir?
Doing great, Jack. Thanks for having me on, man.
Well, I appreciate it. And before we get into the questions surrounding your dad's career and any of the insights that you may have therein, can you share with the fans what it was like to grow up in the household of such a iconic and successful professional wrestler?
Well, it was definitely a unique experience, but like I've said in the past, that was just normal for us. That's what I kind of always knew. It was very interesting, just having a dad who was kind of, I guess, idolized by people. We would go out in public and everyone would stop and come up to him and things like that. Especially in the 90s, they were superstars all over the world. So, I mean, they were getting recognized everywhere. There was never a moment where we could go out where people weren't coming up to him. And I just thought that was always normal. I mean, looking back on it, it's a very peculiar way to grow up. But, I'm very, very fortunate. My father was who he was, and we had a lot of great memories and experiences from that.
In terms of, to build on that question, did you have any sort of unique challenges that you, or experiences that you perhaps took for granted, not knowing when you're growing up that your dad was an extremely famous wrestler, that you look back on and think that was something that made your childhood stand out as unique as compared to perhaps the average person's?
Yeah, I mean, kids are kids, and kids are kind of assholes, to put it politely. So, from a youth and perspective, I could definitely say that it was a bit of a challenge with other kids growing up having a famous father. I guess it was more popular amongst the older people than it was the other kids and stuff like that. Just assume that your life is one way because of what your parents do. And so that was something that I guess I could say, looking back, might have been a little bit of a struggle just because of that situation. But, the lifestyle that he afforded us in that career, I wouldn't take back for anything. We got to travel and see the world as children. I mean, he was always flying, like our family was always over. I mean, he was gone a lot, but he would accommodate having all the family together all the time and everything. So, it was a blessing in disguise. There's a, give and take with every single career, and especially that one. So I feel like he made the right choices for our family. And I mean, I have a very successful business today, a very healthy family, and I wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for him making the sacrifices he made.
Mm-hmm. Looking back to some of your earliest memories, be it in WWF or WCW, etc., did you have any experiences on location with your dad at an event or behind the scenes that stands out? In other words, did you go to his events as a kid?
Yeah, we did. I'll tell you, to answer that question, the one that stands out, I would say probably foremost in my mind. Do you remember the Nitro Girls?
Oh, yes.
All right. So they were performing at the Georgia Dome when the Georgia Dome was still a thing. And there was a referee at the time named Pee Wee, who was a very famous referee. So his son Chase and my dad left us backstage with the Nitro Girls while they went out and did their promo or whatever they had to do. And we actually ended up getting to go out on live TV and dance with the Nitro Girls when they did their little routine. Oh, wow. So that was, I would have to say that probably is, that's probably right there at the front.
When you were, your dad's persona, be it in, world class NWA, WWF, WCW, was, I don't think that it can be argued that your dad was one of the top heels of all time. Did that persona when you were growing up influence your family life at all, or did he have a defined separation between the two polarities?
See, that's a question that can kind of go both ways. So I will say this: he truly believed he was the sexiest man alive. There was no doubt about that. That was all kind of built into the routine. Of course, it was played up. He was a great family man. When he was at home, he was all about us. But he loved that character. He loved that persona. And I remember we had a full gym in our basement, mirrors all the way around. He would be blasting Rolling Stones in the gym in the middle of a workout, just in the mirror, dancing and grooving. Like he really did. He loved that persona. He kind of played it up, obviously, just for the heel mantra. But yeah, no, he was behind himself 100% on that one.
And how did that? It's a positive to have a strong male role model, especially in this day and age. But back then, it's something that a child can definitely benefit from. Did you know where your dad began and where the character started, or did you, what elements of that extreme self-confidence and masculinity did you take forward growing up?
I will tell you this: if one thing that my father taught me, it's just one statement. I'll never forget when he's told me this. He's like, all it takes is for you to make an example out of someone one time in front of a group of people, and none of those people will ever mess with you again. I took that all the way through childhood and into my adult life, into my professional career. He had this machismo kind of personality and all this stuff, but he was a man, and even though I didn't have him for about 9 years before he passed away, I can still look back and I know my uncle, my aunts, I know some of his friends still who are, fortunately still alive and breathing, that will tell you, my father was a zero bullshit guy. He was the first one. If there was something that went down, who would jump in the middle of a fight. He was not scared of anyone. And if anyone thought that they were tougher than my father, he would take them up right there on the spot to prove him wrong. And I respect that. I think that's something that society is missing nowadays. I think people have gone soft, and I think, feelings have gotten way too involved and too much. And, I can definitely say that having that in my childhood definitely played out for the positive for me in my future.
Yeah, absolutely. A fan betrayed by sins is commenting on your dad's tights with the spray paint that was so iconic for the industry. Did you have any? Do you still have any of those, or do you have any mementos from your dad's career that you hold dear?
Oh yeah, we've still got boots. We've still got some of the tights. We've got the iconic tights that we've got. We've got the Cheryl Roberts tights is still, and then we've got the Ultimate Warrior's face on the tights. Those are the ones I know for a fact. And then we've got, I would say, 5 or 6 of his robes that he, his ring robes. Now, a lot of it, unfortunately, in between moving houses over the years, a lot of these movers were dishonest, and we had a lot of stuff come up missing. It is what it is, but we fortunately still do have a lot, that we hold on to, and it's just packed up, put away. We look at it every once in a while and just, reminisce.
Your dad had so many programs that are classic to this day. You mentioned with Jake the Snake and the angle with Cheryl, his program with the Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, and even his earlier work in World Class and the NWA, of course, Sting. What if you could delineate some favorites in terms of your dad's career? Do you have any either programs, feuds, or opponents?
Yeah. So, Sting, that was a really good one for the show. That was a great. But see, a lot of people don't realize my dad and Sting were great friends. I mean, me and his son Steve, we all grew up like right around each other. We were always at each other's birthday parties. I mean, there was a really good relationship there between the families. Now, I would have to say the one that really, to me, looking back and kind of as a spectator, the Ultimate Warrior feud was the absolute best. There was so much energy there on both sides, and there was a real hatred there between the two of those people. So I don't know if many of your listeners have heard the story. So I want to say it was in Toronto. The Warrior was backstage kind of talking smack about my father before he got to the arena. And my father came into the arena and almost ended the Warrior's career backstage in a real fight. Like he just beat the brakes off of him. And Vince almost fired my father over this, allegedly, is what, Ric Flair will tell you. And, so looking back on the energy and the promos and the matches that they had with each other there, that kind of, to me, sticks out as like the one that just really just had all the fireworks with it.
Yeah, and in terms of classic matches and finishes, being a promoter myself, we've put on some successful events this year, and we're looking at what's a finish that would work in a particular situation. And boom, what came to mind from several of us instantaneously is that Warrior Rude finish from SummerSlam, where Heenan held the Warrior's leg, and so much of his body of work is so memorable, not only in terms of the character work, but also the matches as well.
Yeah.
We've got a question from superfan Ibzan, who's asking, your dad, of course, was best friends with Mr. Perfect from the Robbinsdale, Minnesota crew. Did you have any interactions with Curt Henning as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually, his son Joe and I still speak every once in a while. But we all went ice fishing together when we were kids up in like Lake Minnetonka, is where like my dad and him would kind of meet up. We'd bring my grandfather out there, get a little ice house, and we'd spend a couple days out on the ice. But yeah, I mean, those guys were frequent parts of my life.
When you look back on your dad's entire career and how influential he was and is to this day in the industry through many means, does his career influence your professional choices moving forward in your life? What kind of a role did having such an iconic figure as your father have in your own life?
Well, I would say maybe every other day when I have to introduce myself to someone, every third person will be like, that name kind of sounds familiar. Wasn't there a wrestler named Rick Rude? So, I mean, it's always a good entry point to conversation. I will say, on a personal note, it's challenging trying to make a name for yourself when you're in, your name is already so well known, essentially, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So I take advantage of it where I can. A lot of the people I do business with are a little bit older generation. They remember my father. So I leverage all that where I can. But for the most part, man, a lot of people know Rick Rude not because of the wrestler. They know him because of the businessman. And, that's me. So, I take the name, I wear it with pride, and I hold my head high when I tell people who I am. If they happen to know my father, I tell them the story, tell them who I am and the relationship there. And, it's been really a nice icebreaker through life for a lot of people. So I enjoy it. It's been a blessing.
I wanted to shout out the human horror movie Adam Newsom, who put together this interview and often talks about the one of the greatest moments in the Monday Night War, and that was when your dad appeared on Monday Night Raw and Nitro at the same time, and then later that week was on ECW Hardcore TV. Do you have a lot of fans coming up to you and talking to you about that particular that moment?
It comes up every once in a while. That's as far as the intricacies of exactly like what the whole, what was so special. I know how the tapings work and everything like that. So I never thought it was really such a big deal, I guess you could say. But looking back, I kind of understand why people were like, whoa, that's absolutely crazy. But I do remember ECW when that all came about. And I will tell you this, I do have some memories of being down there in Orlando when they were filming for ECW. And that was a completely different breed of wrestling. I mean, that was unique.
Mm-hmm. One fan is asking about your dad's robes, which were quite memorable in and of themselves. I know we touched on memorabilia before, but do you have any of those still? And do you have any idea how much the fan is asking, how much they cost and where he got them?
I am not sure what they paid for them at the time. I do know that the robes and the tights were all done by someone that they had hired locally in the Alpharetta area where we lived. Who that person was or what they're doing now, if they're even still doing it, I couldn't tell you. But we all had those custom made at like a little local shop.
Did you ever consider a career in wrestling yourself? Obviously, you're for the fans that aren't aware, you're an accomplished bodybuilder. You've got the size, you've got the genetics. Did you ever consider pursuing a pro wrestling career yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely in consideration at points in my life. I mean, growing up and trying to find your own way in this world isn't, especially without a father being around, isn't the easiest thing. So sometimes, hey, the easiest thing to do would be do what my father did, make the phone call and get into it. But I didn't, it was a little bit of pride with that maybe that stopped me. I wanted to make my own way, and I didn't want to, just ride on my father's coattail. I feel like I would maybe, maybe I would have done great things in the business. Maybe I just would have kind of fluttered out after, a short-term career. It just seemed to me like my father, all the sacrifices he made throughout his life and having to be on the road that many days a year, he wanted a life for us that was better and easier than that career. And I feel like I would have been doing him a disservice because I know my mother will tells us all the time, he did not want us to do that. He worked his ass off to make sure we didn't have to do those things. And, I went into business, fortunately, like we talked about, the name didn't hurt. The confidence he gave me and just like a lot of the life skills that I got from who he was and the way we were raised. But no, it just wasn't right for me. The time passed and I just decided to take a different route.
In terms of your business ventures and that sort of thing, was there a lot of fans are interested in terms of children of legends, if there's any bit of the wrestling philosophy or psychology, if you will, that you brought into, aside from your name recognition that you touched on, that you bring into the business world. Is that something that that has been a factor for you in terms of, we hear a lot about, playing a role, playing a character, working, that sort of thing?
I guess you could definitely say that. I mean, there is an element of a character in every single career that anyone does. I mean, to me personally, I would say in relation to my career, I've always just, I don't know what it is. I've been very fortunate to have an aura about me. When I walk into a room, people notice. So I always, no matter what the situation is or how, superior my associates or colleagues might be in a certain situation, I'm never intimidated. I walk in, I don't speak if I don't know what I'm talking about. I listen more than I do speak. And, I've had a lot of success with that. I mean, I just kind of play it quiet, play it stern, play it serious, and it's always worked out well for me.
Very good. A fan on social media wanted me to ask you about, and I'm seeing a fan here is asking about your experience at the WWE Hall of Fame. And Ibzan is asking here, did WWE ever speak to you on how over you were after the Hall of Fame speech? The whole arena, and I do remember this, cheered a lot when you were speaking, and just in general, your recollections of that event.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I actually met my wife on that weekend that I was down there for that event. We met. She was on a Disney family vacation, and we were married 3 months later. So that's always going to be a very special, near and dear to my heart event. But But no, from the moment we got there, I was kind of nervous. I had never done anything like that before in such a large, capacity. I had written my own speech. What's on YouTube now is only about a half of the full speech. It was about a 5 minute long speech. I assumed that the writers were going to look it over, chop it up, re-edit everything. I sat down with the writer maybe an hour and a half before I had to go on, and he just looked at it, read through it. He was like, perfect. It's fine. Just go with it. Wow. And I was like, yeah. So then nervously, I tried to remember and memorize the entire thing. So I wasn't just sitting there looking down, looking up, looking down, looking up, looking like a schmuck trying to read this in front of 17,000 people. But I remember, once I got going and got into it, I kind of found my rhythm and fell into my place. And all I can say is that it truly must have been like a genetic inheritance, because once I got going, after about 3 or 4 words in, I felt calm, relaxed, like I had done that a million times. And I just went with it. The crowd was great. All the fans were awesome. I mean, like, everyone was super receptive of it. And yeah, I'll never forget that applause at the end of that. I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal. 3 days after I gave that speech, there was 2 videos on YouTube. One of them was a full-length speech, and the other one was a WWE edit that was about, I want to say, 2 minutes and 45 seconds of my speech. Both videos already had more views than all of the other inductees who actually gave their own speeches. That longest video with a full speech got taken down shortly thereafter that. And I'm sure that, WWE had something to do with that, because I don't want to say that I mean, the numbers don't lie. I didn't expect this to happen. I just went out there and did my best, but people seem to really enjoy that a lot more than they did the rest of the show. So
definitely. Now that whole experience probably was intense emotionally and a bit of a blur, so to speak. But did you? I'm sure you did run into any of your dad's former colleagues, and did anything that they say to you stand out in your memory?
I will tell you, Ricky Steamboat, he had a lot of good things to say about my father. And I must sing that man's praises. If there is one of those wrestlers, and a lot of these guys, don't get me wrong, they're rough, they're tough, they're not, not people you would consider friends, like really deep down, true down friends. Steamboat, the most genuine, nice guy. He had nothing to say but nice things about my father and my family. And then the Big Show. The Big Show had a bunch of great stories to tell about my father. He was like, your dad was like a mentor to me, helped me out in the, when I was coming into it. And he had a lot of great stories to tell me about my father, and then Kevin Nash, even. I'll never forget this. So we're at the hotel they put us all at. And I just got some coffee at Starbucks, and I go out into the hallway, and I'm kind of like looking down just on my phone or something. And I start walking back towards the main lobby. I look over to my right, and Kevin Nash is just kind of walking right beside me. Didn't say anything, nothing. Kept looking straight forward, but paced with me. He just kind of leans down. He goes, I could tell you some stories about your old man. And then just kept walking, peeled off, didn't say anything else. I mean, these guys are great. It's funny. I'm sure that they are a little bit touch and go with what's okay to talk about around me and what, I mean, they got some stories that are pretty vulgar, but if you catch the right one on the right day, I mean, they all say good things about my dad, and that he was a kind of really a mentor figure for a lot of them when they were coming into the business.
Mm-hmm. Your dad first although worked other territories, including Mid-South and Vancouver up here for All-Star Wrestling, he first rose to prominence in WCCW, where he was the heavyweight champion there of the Texas, the Von Erich territory. Just wondering if by off chance you have any recollections from him of his time in Texas, and your thoughts on the upcoming Ironclaw movie that everyone is talking about to be released this month about the Von Erichs and that glory period of which your dad was a part?
Well, I will say that was well before my time. I didn't come along until 1990. So, that predated me quite a bit. As far as the movie coming up, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and there's a lot more. There's other families that you could do that with. The Hearts would be a good one. But personally, don't get me wrong. Zac Efron is not Kerry Von Erich. I mean, they could have got someone who played that part physically a lot better. But we'll see. We'll see how the movie goes. I think it's a good story. A lot of history there. A lot of people are interested to see it. But I think they definitely could have played that up a little bit better on the character choice.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had the exact same reaction to it when I saw the casting of Kevin and Kerry in particular. Not even close. Fan is asking if you're aware of your dad, that being a mentor figure and etc. behind the scenes. Did he ever train anyone that you're aware of in the business?
I don't know. Okay, so I don't know if this is how accurate of a memory this is, but I will. For some reason, it's on my mind that he worked with Dwayne Johnson for a little while when he was in. Like before he was coming on, I think there was some interactions there. I don't want to say 100% that's true, but that's the one for some reason I've kind of heard over time, and that, there might be some truth to that. I think a lot more of it was just more so like with the Big Show, with like Kevin Nash and some of these guys, it was more like kind of mitigating the politics of it when they were coming in. You know what I'm saying? Like it was, don't let this guy push you around, stand up for yourself to this guy, tell him no, like, just that sort of thing. The things that no one will tell you, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys come in and they're workers. They call themselves workers, but you don't want to get worked too much or you're going to get pushed around and shit like that. So I think he just kind of, was that backbone for a lot of them, just to say, no, screw that. You're not doing this. You can say no.
Yeah, perhaps that's why your dad and I think of like Bruiser Brody that would stand up for themselves and take a line with promoters. Some of them have characterized them as bullies or whatnot, but definitely an industry that you can definitely be taken advantage of, so to speak. Did you are you aware, or did you recognize that some in the wrestling business thought your dad was a bit aggressive or salty with management and behind the scenes type of thing?
I mean, I'm sure you could find tons of people who would feel that way, but I don't know. I think my father would probably look at those people and call them pussies.
Yes, indeed. What are some of your most fond memories outside of the ring or the business with your dad?
Really just traveling. I mean, we got to travel all over Europe. We used to take vacations all the time when he wasn't working. I would have to say that probably first and foremost. I mean, it was always great when my dad would show up to school and, do events like that and stuff with us, soccer games, sports events. I mean, they were on the road 300 days a year back then. So when we got to have him to ourselves, it was like, walking around with Superman. I would go to the gym with him, just watch him, just hang out, play my Game Boy while he worked out and stuff. We just spent time together. I can't say I ever took anything for granted. I mean, it was always great when he was around. But yeah, I mean, just pretty standard stuff, man. Just, vacations, holidays, things like that.
Was your dad's, and I think I know the answer for this. Again, I touched on the fact that you are a very accomplished bodybuilder. Was your dad's emphasis on physical fitness and strength and having one of the best physiques in wrestling, period, even to this day? Did that motivate you to get into the gym, et cetera, when you were of the right age?
No, absolutely. That's probably the primary reason. If I could say he had an influence on anything, I can't have a father that looks like that and then me end up looking like a bag of milk. I've got to keep it high and tight, or else, I'd get a lot of questions about that. So I don't know. I'm always trying to like push the physical limits of my genetics and my body. I posted a picture recently on Instagram I got my weight up to 285. So I'm about 20 pounds heavier than my father was at his heaviest. And I've still got the definition and everything. So, my next competition I'm hoping to be 300 before I start my prep so I can hit the stage at about 265. And I'm a lot more muscular than my father was when it comes to size, but I can't deny my father's genetics, like the way he was pieced together. He's got something I don't have. Now, my late brother, who passed away when he was 19, Colton, he had my father's body. If he was still alive, he was built exactly like my father. From what everyone in my family tells me, I'm built more like my grandfather, my dad's dad. So, but he definitely biggest influence in my life on my my bodybuilding and my physical fitness was my father.
And many others, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Is asking if Bobby Heenan ever showed up at your house, or you have any Bobby the Brain stories, given the fact that he managed your dad so famously in the WWF.
I actually don't. From my memory and recollection, Bobby was never at our house. I will say, if anyone was at our house frequently, it was Hawk and Animal from the Road Warriors. They were great friends with my dad, and every time they were in town, they would just stay at our house. Sting, like I mentioned earlier, they lived right up the street, so they would come over a lot. And then Mick Foley and Jim Neidhart. Those guys were always, we lived in the same area. Our families were friends together. So, that was kind of like the little circle.
What, being the son of Rick Rude, we've talked about, some of your experiences growing up, but in terms of the wrestling fans that so many to this day really idolize your dad and put him on such a pedestal, how do you feel about wrestling fans in general? Is it a double-edged sword because we're a different bunch, so to speak, at times, but also have that that real genuine affection for your dad and his career?
Look, man, everyone's got their thing. And hey, my father loved his fans. If it wasn't for his fans, he wouldn't have done it. You guys gave him a career ultimately. And I'm ever grateful for that. I mean, I like some weird ass shit. So it's not for me to look at anyone else and think anything anyone else likes is, anything but do what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever get tired of the recognition and people, you said they recognize the name, et cetera, et cetera. Do you ever get tired of, oh, your dad, blah, and et cetera, and I loved him growing up, or does that ever get old, so to speak?
No, I wouldn't say that gets old. I will be honest. What I'm not going to say it bothers me, but I find it peculiar when people want to take pictures with me or get me to sign something just because of, I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like, I know that was my father, but yeah, I'm nothing. I'm just his son, so that kind of always makes me a little, I'm not going to say uncomfortable, but it's different when, because there's some diehard fans who are like, oh my gosh, let me take a picture with you. I can't believe, everyone's won't believe this. And I'm like, what will they not believe? Like, famous people have kids. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I wouldn't say it's anything that turns me off, but it's definitely peculiar when those types of things happen. I mean, I get it all the time. And like I tell people, I'm like, look, thank you. Like, my father was like, you guys fans were the most important thing in the world to my father. And I'm ever appreciative for that. Like, if it wasn't for you guys, he wouldn't have had a career. So I'm always welcome to that. But please, if you see me in public, say hi, but I didn't do anything.
That's tremendous. Do you watch the current product of either WWE or AEW? That's part one of this two-part question. The second part is, you mentioned Sting a lot. My God, 65 or however years old, still working in the ring, about to do a big retirement with AEW. How do you feel about his longevity in the ring as one of your dad's greatest opponents?
Hey, I mean, if he's doing it because he's happy to be doing it still, I'm more power to him. I think it's incredible. The guy's in great shape for his age. I mean, he's always taken care of himself fairly well from what I remember. So, I mean, hey, I think it's great. I absolutely think it's great. I mean, in general, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but truthfully, just like the whole culture of it now, like in the whole programming and like the storylines and everything, I think it's a little bit soap opera-y. I mean, it's a little silly. I mean, there's not as much energy and like real, I, I don't know. It's just not what it used to be. That's all. It's not what it used to be.
Yes, and that's why a lot of our subscriber base at the Hannibal TV are, we look back and we see how it was, and it was definitely a different business when your dad was at the top of it. If you had to summarize the impact or the legacy of your dad's career in pro wrestling, what would that be? Maybe delineate it to a couple of points, or is that possible for you to kind of put a bow on it?
Yeah, I don't think he has a career that you can just throw into a box like that. I mean, depending on who you ask and depending on what other wrestlers, you might have had him engaging with, you could get a different person, a different story, a different, perspective from everyone. He was a lot of things. He was very involved in the storyline creation process. He was very involved in, just coordinating a lot of the energy that you saw back then. And, I don't think I could put his career into a box. I couldn't summarize that in a few words. There was too much going on there.
Well, definitely a legendary career, given the fact that, again, there are so many fans that look back so fondly on his career and rate him still rightfully as one of the greatest heels of all time in this industry. In terms of what you're up to and where folks can keep up with your comings and goings, if so desired, where would that be, Rick? Do you have anything that you're promoting or contact information you'd like to get out there?
Yeah, I mean, just my bodybuilding career. I'm working on that. My professional business. I highly doubt there's anyone who has anything that they would be able to compromise in that with, like in that regard. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, check out my stories and just my pictures post, and follow what I've got going on with my physical development. It's at Big Rick Energy on Instagram.
Well, we really appreciate your time tonight on the Great North Wrestling Podcast. We'll definitely keep up with your comings and goings in terms of that fabulous bodybuilding career. And again, thank you for coming on the Great North Wrestling Podcast tonight.
All right. I appreciate it, Jack. Good talking to you.
Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Another great one in our series, talking to the children of legends. And they don't get much bigger at all than Ravishing Rick Rude, a man whose work I admired most definitely as a child, and look forward to perhaps continuing this series in the future. But until then, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and have a great evening. Take care, everybody.